Namo Shakyamunaye Buddhaya. Dear respected Thai, dear sisters, dear brothers, I really appreciate that you come for this class. When I was a novice with Sister Daknim, and we had this kind of constant immersion in the Dhamma, right? So Thai was teaching sometimes 3-4 times a week, and we had a chance to just bathe in the Dhamma, sometimes in Vietnamese, sometimes in English, sometimes in French. And that is, anyway, I just, when I see Sister Hung Nim, Sister Tan Duan, Sister Daknim, and Brother Min An, and now Andrew, just coming to bathe in the teaching is really it's kind of like we say walking through the meadow, and then there's dew on the grass, and it naturally accumulates on your robe. So the more Dhamma you immerse yourself in, the easier it is to practice when difficulty arises, and then to be able to transmit the Dhamma. We need so many Dhamma teachers. The world needs so many Dhamma teachers, and when I see Brother Min An sitting at the bell every week, I know he will be a great Dhamma teacher, because he's just letting the Dhamma come in. And so we need to look in our life in how we're consuming things, because even in the monastery there are a lot of distractions. And I see here at Deer Park, we have the internet, we have different things that can pull us away, even we're in the monastery. So we need to look and see, how are we spending our time? What are we consuming in every moment, in every hour? And that is our choice. We make a choice as practitioners. And so I know that by becoming a monastic, we make the choice to come and live our whole life in the Sangha. And so we just have to look around, and we have nourishing words, nourishing thoughts, nourishing actions, and we can consume them. Just now I got back from driving on the freeway to pick up my father in near San Diego, and I haven't been down driving a car in a few weeks. That's what I love about being a monk. I don't have to drive, I don't have to go out of the monastery. And the past 2 weeks I've been in a writing retreat, so the Sangha has been really compassionate to me. I felt a little bit shy to ask, but Brother Phap Luu and I are working on a book on mindful walking in nature, and now we have a bit of a deadline. I mean, we still have time, but in our daily schedule in the monastery, it's not easy to find time to write. So I'm so happy that the Sangha let me do this, and I had a... You cannot hear? Can you come closer? Otherwise, I'll have to get we turn on the sound system. Yeah, maybe you can ask Kenley, and I use the microphone. But we are so far away that yeah. Maybe I need to come closer. Yeah, maybe I'll move closer. Here we go. Oh, Kenley will adjust the camera. Oh, thank you, brother. So I've been in can you hear now? Is that good? Okay. So I've been in this writing retreat. So the Sangha let me go camping up in the mountain. So I had my hammock and I had a table and some water and Gewan to make tea. And Brother Peter Kuhn, the lay brother, he brought me some Longjin tea. Very nice. And yes, and I just had a pad, some legal pads and a pen. I had a red pen and a black pen and a highlighter, like a, yellow. And I was reading through, first I was reading through transcripts from when we led a trip on the Appalachian Trail in 2018. Of the Dhamma talks, and we gave Dhamma talks for each of the folds of the Eightfold Path. So Brother Phap Sa and myself and Thai Phap Khai and Brother Phap Man at that time, Thai Phap Man. And so I was reading through and I was highlighting. It was so nourishing because I have the intern at Parallax helped to transcribe the talks, and so I just had to go through on the paper and highlight all the interesting bits. I was having fun looking and seeing, usually I didn't highlight the bits that sound like Thai. I highlighted the bits that sound more like that brother, the particular things that they were interested in or that they learned in their own practice to bring into the book. And then I was spending the rest of the time writing. And it's so nice to write on a piece of paper. I'm so used to typing since I was very young, and to write out by hand and just take time and lay in the hammock, and as things come and memories come, and then I reflect on how my practice has grown through that experience of going on walking in nature on the Appalachian Trail. Yeah, I just am able to write and and so actually my voice is not very strong because I haven't been talking for 2 weeks. I've just been mostly, a little bit. I came for some meetings, for Dhamma teacher meetings. And one morning the sisters came up and walked by, Sister Hung Nim and Tan Duan, came up to with the others to the upper waterfall. And that was so nice to take a break from the writing retreat and have tea. So I felt a little bit like a forest monk for a week or 2 weeks. Just like I live up in the mountain and then I would walk down and come to meals. So I didn't have my alms bowl, but I had, when I picked up the bowl, I think I'm a monk. I live up in the mountain and I come down to beg for food. And so, thanks to Brother Andrew, he joined my cooking team, so I didn't have to cook. And I just had a chance to eat and practice gratitude for the Sangha. I feel very grateful I know we have so many things that we're doing in the Sangha, and to have 2 weeks like that is very precious. So I'm very grateful. So that's been my kind of past 2 weeks, and then today, to get in a car and start driving into town, and 8-lane highway or 6-lane, I don't know, the 15. Sometimes it seems like it has 8 lanes with the HOV lanes. And on the way back here with my father, I had to cross from the HOV lane across, I think, about 8 lanes to get off on the 70. What is it, the 78? Yeah, going towards Ramona. And I thought, my goodness. How many things I have to be aware of in that moment and really be mindful. I'm in this car, in this hunk of metal that I'm directing with the steering wheel. And we know, I think recently there was an accident, so we know how dangerous it can be to drive like that. So I'm very, so to be in the monastery and to be able to, just listen to the coyotes calling in the night, or listening to the owl hooting. This morning I had a visitation, or yesterday afternoon actually, I had a visitation from the Tarantula Hawk. They are out at different times of the year, but I remember seeing them a lot at this time of year when it gets really hot. So the Tarantula Hawk is a kind of wasp, and it's very big, like about that big. It's the biggest wasp I've ever seen. And it has these kind of what's the word? Many colored wings. Depending on the light, they shine, but they look kind of orangish, but they look different in different light. And this wasp, it searches for the tarantula. And they say it has the most painful bite of any insect in the world. So I was very attentive when I saw the Tarantula Hawk below my hammock, kind of going around, and he was going into holes and looking under the leaves to try to find the tarantula. And when they find the tarantula, they sting the tarantula, and the tarantula doesn't die, but the sting is so painful that it just becomes totally paralyzed. And then the Tarantula Hawk starts to drag the tarantula. One brother told me he saw a Tarantula Hawk flying, carrying a tarantula, but I think it must have been a very small tarantula because the big one, there's no way it can carry it. But one time I saw that Tarantula Hawk sting the tarantula, and then I was up walking in Daily Ranch, and it was dragging this big tarantula like this. I just saw this big tarantula, and it was kind of like moving very strangely in the dark. It was kind of, I'm used to tarantulas walking. They're very quiet and very careful of their steps. But this tarantula was just kind of, I saw this big black thing just kind of moving and then moving a little. And I thought the tarantula was dead because it was not moving at all. And the tarantula hawk would bite the leg, or kind of the body, the bottom of the tarantula, and then it used its legs like this to push in the sand, and then slowly it dragged this huge tarantula, and then normally it brings it to a hole. It finds a hole and it puts a tarantula in there, and then it injects a larva into the body of the paralyzed tarantula, which must be pretty horrific. And the larva then wakes up and starts to eat the tarantula from the inside. This is nature, right in our backyard, happening. So this was many years ago I saw that, but yeah. So this was the first one I've seen in a while. So I was in my hammock, and I saw the Tarantula Hawk. The fly is so big, it flies very lazily, but it's very quick, and I think it's one of the meanest. The Tarantula Hawk. Even though when it bites you, it cannot, it doesn't harm you, but it's very, very painful, is what they say. I don't know, but. So when I saw the Tarantula Hawk, I really sat up and I paid attention. You stay over there, Tarantula Hawk. I'll stay here. We mind our own business. I will not bother you. Yeah, and then to come down and go into a car, into the town. And when I drove to pick up my father, I saw the traffic coming out of San Diego, everyone driving home from a day at work. And and because I'm a monk, when I see that, I have this feeling of compassion in my heart, because I just know, I think of the people who every day are driving back and forth, back and forth. Yeah. And when I picked up my father and we were driving back, he is now in his almost 80 years old. In fact, next year he will turn 80. He told me as we pulled into Escondido, he said, "Do this." Actually, he worked his whole life until he was 60. Most of his life, not his whole life. He did take a break for a few years, which was wonderful when I was a teenager. But he asked the older man, he said, "Do this." He said, if there was some alien life form looking down at us going back and forth in our cars, you would think like the ants. When we look down at the ants, I had a little bit, some potato chips out at my where sometimes I had some, mainly for the salt, because in the heat I needed something for salt. So sometimes I would eat a few, and I dropped one chip on the ground, and this morning it was almost black. I think it must be so exciting for the ants to have it way up there on the mountain to have a chip. And then so I saw them going back and forth, and then taking a little bit of the chip and then going back to their ant nest. So this is apropos the topic for today, which is free will. So the 18th tenet. It's amazing, we got to 18. It's almost halfway. Free will is possible. Wow, that is a bold statement. Free will is possible. Freedom is possible. So we are here, we are students of the Shakyamuni Buddha, and we have experienced freedom ourselves, a taste of freedom, and so we've encountered the Dhamma, and so we decide to give up our life chasing after sense pleasures, driving around from here to there, to have a career, to have a family, to have a car, to have status, to respect for a lot of us. Most of us, our families are not so happy that we're monks and nuns. A lot of us difficulty convincing our friends, why are we doing this? Why are we giving everything up? Most of the monks and nuns, we had successful lives out in the world. We were doing quite well. But deep inside of us, we felt that there was something missing, and it's freedom. We're not truly free. And we know, because we've tasted the Dhamma, that freedom is possible. And so we cannot accept anything less than freedom. And so we get rid of all of these material things. But then when we come to the monastery, if we're not careful, we start to accumulate material things again. Not like cars and houses and things like that, but maybe, a tea set or a nice backpack or a sleeping bag or whatever. Yeah. Not only material things, but also we like to listen to some famous singer from Vietnam or Western, and so we have a little place where we listen to that music. So there are many ways we can still continue accumulating things in the monastery. But the environment is designed in a way to help us to let go, because we are not in fear that we're not going to have food, not have a place to sleep. There's one Zen master, he said, when you become a monk, you get $3 million. $1 million is that you don't have to worry about your health. Another $1 million is you don't have to worry about having food to eat. And the third $1 million is that you don't have to worry about having a place to sleep. And that is true. You know, all of us as a monastic, we no longer worry about those things. I have food to eat. Oh, I need to go to the store. Oh, to go to the store, I need money. I need a car. So like all the conditions that are required for us to have food, to have a place to sleep. I tried to live very simply this week, because I like to remind myself that I can just live with, very little. Just a little hammock and some water. It's okay. And I can be happy in the forest. So from time to time, we need to get in touch with that root. In the past, at Deer Park, Thai encouraged us to do alms round. So we contacted the lay community, and the whole Sangha went down with our Sangati and with our alms bowl to a park. And the lay friends offered food, and we went in order of ordination with our alms bowls, food into our bowl, and then we would sit down outside in the field and enjoy eating together. And I really hope we can do that. I was thinking when we have for those of you online, we are having a great Precepts transmission ceremony for many of the young brothers, Brother Min An, and also Sister Tan Duan will become Shikshamana, and many of them become full bhikshus. And I was thinking, wow, Cliff is coming here, Magnolia, we should do an alms round. It would be so lovely, because Thai loves to, from time to time, to get in touch with our root tradition, which is that we beg. Bhikshu means to beg, a beggar, from the root form bhik, and bhikshuni as well. Right? So it's nice to get in touch with our root teachers, the things he liked to do. The Shakyamuni Buddha, he liked to live in the forest, very simply. He liked to go on alms round. So he didn't have a refrigerator where there's food, you can open it up and go inside anytime you want. He knew that every day he didn't know what he would eat. He would go on alms round. Sometimes his attendant would go on alms round and then bring food back for him. And he didn't know. I know the monks in Bayagiri, like the abbot Ajahn Pasano, he told the story about how one time he went on Bindapat, which is when the monks, I think Bindapat or Tudong, but anyway, when you go on a kind of long, extended journey and you don't know where you're going, you just go to that town, and he was in Thailand, and he went to a place, I think up near Laos in the very north, east of Thailand. And he stayed there for many weeks. And every day when he went down for alms round, they put white rice in his bowl and a boiled frog. And so every day, because in that area it's quite poor, and what they have is white rice, and they have lots of frogs. So he ate what the people ate. And so every day he would wake up and maybe he would think, oh, it'd be so lovely today if I had anything other than white rice and boiled frog. But once again, he went on alms round and they put in white rice and a boiled frog. And so every day he just ate like that. And that is It was very hard for his body and for his health, but that is the spirit of our practice. We don't know what we're going to eat. Here we are in the land of milk and honey in Southern California, right? And we have like jimbos and nice organic everything. I coming back from Plum Village, I was quite, oh wow, in the cooler, my goodness. This is very nice what we have here. But if we're not careful, then that becomes an attachment. So this is what Thai wants us to remember, that free will is possible. We need to look at the ways in which we have developed habit energies around our ways of eating, our ways of walking, our ways of talking, our ways of interacting. And so, because if we're not careful, the way we walk, the way we drive, the way we talk, we are like automatons. Yeah, automatons. The plural is automata. It's a Latin word. It means automata were machines developed at least in Europe, especially back to the beginnings of I think the 16th century already. There was scientists who created automata, and machinery that resembled in some way the actions of a human being. And so they're not really alive, but their way of moving is like a little bit like human, so it gives the appearance of being alive. And there are many traditions of this, right? And now we have artificial intelligence, smart robots, smartphones, yeah, and we have we continue in this tradition of automata in the modern world to make machines that can behave like human beings. Now even have conversations. Some of the Chinese monks that came to Plum Village a few years ago, one of their monks was an engineer and software designer before he became a monk. And so he developed software for a robot monk. And that monk can answer questions about the Dhamma. So it looks like a little plastic kind of very cute monk you can put on your table, and you can ask a question like, what is the Eightfold Noble Path? And the monk will say, the Eightfold Noble Path is right view. Right view is letting go of all views, something like that, And it will go through and tell you about the Eightfold Noble Path. So you don't need to have Brother Phap Luu or Sister Tan Duan to answer your questions, but you just have a robot monk that sits on your table and he just answers all the questions. Very easy, right? So they developed this monk. Unfortunately, it only answers questions in Mandarin Chinese. But maybe in the future they'll have one that answers questions in English. And then I don't have to give more. I can just lay in my hammock in the mountain and put the robot monk here, and we just start the camera and you can hear the Dhamma from the robot monk. Is it okay? I'm not sure Brother Min An will come to hear the robot monk. Automata, okay. So a machine that simulates the human being. So Thai said, we walk, we talk, we drive, we eat like automata, like an automaton. Yeah, our habit energies are driving us. And without mindfulness, we are not aware of what we are doing. We are already, like automata, we have a program to tell us what we're going to do next. We're in our brain, we're already programming, maybe our vacation, be how we're going to go see our daughter in a play that evening at her school, and yet we're driving the car and we're not there physically with the car. I mean, we're there physically, but our mind is not there, it's somewhere else. So in that way, we're actually like automata. And so Tai said, free will is possible, thanks to the three trainings. We already talked about the three trainings. Tai also call them the three taintless trainings. That we have in all of our centers, on our stained glass windows. Mindfulness. So when we practice stopping, when we hear the sound of the bell, we become aware of what we are doing. And that training, then we carry with us throughout our day. So we learn the capacity to stop and recognize what is going on in the present moment, and not to continue to get carried away by, like an automaton, by our thinking, by our speaking, by our acting. When we hear the sound of the bell and listen to the 5 contemplations, we are reminded to be aware of our food and aware of the community, to look deeply into the food and see every time, not just once, like, oh, I look at my carrot, oh yeah, the sun's in there, the rain, the earth, yeah, I know that. And I'm already done with that. I don't need to do that anymore. That's not training. Knowledge is an obstacle. At the beginning of the class I talked about we talk about 2 kinds of obstacles. Avarana, or obstacle or obscuration. Something that darkens a part of our mind, a part of our awareness. Anyone remember what they are? The 2 avaranas. Knowledge is one, right? And the first one is afflictions. So, phiền não là cái gì? Tiếng Phạn. Klesha. Klesha karana. And Jneya Varana. Klesha là phiền não. Phiền não. So, the obstacle of afflictions. Or sometimes defilement. Usually we say afflictions. And the obstacle of knowledge. So this is fairly easy to understand, the obstacle of our actions. When we are angry, we cannot see clearly. It's like a whole area of our mind has become obscured, blocked by our anger or our despair, when we are in a state of despair, then even our best friend comes and tells us that we are so wonderful, that we are kind, that they're so happy to be there with us, but we are just lost in our despair. We cannot generate a feeling of joy. That is the obstacle of afflictions. When our klesha, our fear now, are strong, then they block. And even when they are weak, they continue to block areas of our mind. And so there are many areas of our mind in our body which do not access. Tai said it's like our laptop nowadays, even an iPad, a smartphone is a supercomputer from a few years ago, 10, 20 years ago. It's like a supercomputer. But have we realized everything that supercomputer can do? Probably not. We just make a document, we send an email, we use the web browser. But actually, if we really know all of the things that small computer in our pocket could do, it can fly an airplane, if we know how to harness its power. And the same is true of our mind. Mind has incredible capacities. And that's what the Buddha demonstrated. Actually, he realized this, but at some point after his enlightenment, he thought it was so tiring to try to transmit it to people, because then they get jealous with one another. My students will become jealous one of the other. They'll cause me all kinds of conflict, problems. So he just said, I don't want to teach the Dhamma because it's too tiring to teach people. But then in the story, one of the great devas, Brahma, came and begged the Brahma Sahampati, begged the Buddha, please, Buddha, teach the Dhamma. There are those who have only a little bit of dust, so a little bit of obscuration. They are not so overwhelmed by their despair, their anger, and their knowledge. If they hear just a little bit of the Dhamma, their eyes, their sight will become clear, and they can be free. They can touch freedom. And so the Buddha taught, and so we have the Buddha's teaching. So we look and see in our own life, how are these obstacles affecting our ability to see our mind's own capacity. So we have 5 mindfulness trainings. We know that if we do not kill, let others kill, that we have less affliction. It's for our own benefit. Of course it benefits other living beings because we don't harm other living beings. But it makes us suffer. We don't want to hurt other living beings. It's so painful. Even a small animal, a small insect, when you see it suffer because you hurt its leg, or you do something, maybe you just turn on the water and there's an ant in the sink and it drowns. And we feel the effect of that. Even we don't intend to harm. Yeah. Of course, even more so if we intend. Much, much more so. But we feel some effect in our mind, but even the smallest animal. And so those afflictions, they create obstacles for us to see our mind's capacity. So we practice the mindfulness trainings in order to open up our capacity so that we can overcome, these things like anger, despair, and give rise to compassion and understanding. If we are living our everyday life in anger and despair about the past, and regrets and worries and so forth, then it's very difficult to have compassion for ourselves or for others. So we have that capacity, our mind has the capacity to be compassionate, but it's blocked by our afflictions. So the practice is how can we learn to reduce our afflictions? And so we see that these things are not so important. We don't need to get angry. We don't need to get lost in despair. We practice to see the phenomenal world as illusory. It's not the sense that, like, this table is not there, but in the sense that when we see that this physical table is actually not what I get attached to, but it's my idea about the table, the feeling of the table, the color. I'm not too attached to tables. But I might be attached to certain kinds of food. I might be attached to certain kinds of sound. And so because we take those things to be really real, actually it's just our perception. And so that leads to affliction. So one of the practices that we do is to see that this is only my perception. It is not really the table that I'm attached to, but actually my perception about it. It is not really my loved one, my beloved one, that I love so deeply, but it's the image I have of that person inside that I'm attached to. And so when they leave and they go off with someone else, I suffer so much, right? I have so much pain. But it's not because the physical person has left, it's because the physical person is now in conflict with our image of the person who loves us, who cares about us, who wants to stay with us. And that dissonance, that cognitive dissonance, in Buddhism we call that klesha varana. Yeah. You can listen to the sound of the bell. Breathe in, breathe out. Nowhere to go and nothing to do. So find a way out of this cycle of affliction, which makes us live like automata. Another way to talk about the obstacles is as a cycle of reacting. We call it samsara. We just keep going around and around and around. So in Buddhism, this cycle of birth and death. And by birth and death we mean of things arising and passing away. The same thoughts over and over, rising, passing away, arising, passing away. Our cycle of reaction, we behave like an automata. So how do we get freedom? So we need to work, we need to train ourselves. We need to recognize that even as I stand here giving the talk, I know that I'm full of habit energies. Speaking in English is a habit. Using my hands like this is a habit, right? So everything, there's habitual action there. So of course the Buddha recognized that we have habit energies. So we learn to take on good habits, right? The kind of habits that will keep us free from the obstacle of affliction. And also help us to let go of our attachment to knowledge. So the obstacle of affliction, that is more clear, perhaps. But the obstacle of knowledge can be more subtle. For example, we can get very attached to the Buddha's teaching. That's what, as Buddhists, maybe we think of ourselves as Buddhists, that can be one of our struggles, because we like Buddhism, so we don't want to hear about anything else that's not Buddhism. But Tai asks us, we need to see Buddhism in non-Buddhist teachings. So we recognize that Buddhism is made up of only non-Buddhist elements. So that way we learn to overcome the obstacle of knowledge. So we don't get caught in Buddhist terms, but we see them only as guiding means to help us to look deeply into life. And it may be that from Christianity or Western philosophy or literature or Islam or Zoroastrianism, whatever, you can find Buddhist elements there in those teachings, in the teachings on love, teachings on understanding, even though they might not use those words, but you can feel something we can call love, something we can call compassion in all of these wisdom traditions. So even we need to train ourselves to not be mind to be blocked by being attached to Buddhist teachings, even though they give us so much freedom. Built into them is the letting go. Just like the story of the raft, right? The man builds a raft to cross to the other. If he's attached to the raft, then he wants to pick it up and carry it with him everywhere he goes. So in case there's another river, he can cross the river with that raft. The Buddhist teachings are like that. We need to not be like that man. We leave the raft there. We let go. So when the Dhamma helps us to be free, we don't need to go running back to the Dhamma and just get attached to it dogmatically, but learn to widen that freedom. Yeah, so when we touch freedom with mindfulness, for example, by eating our meal in mindfulness, getting in touch with the flavors, no two meals are the same. Every meal that I sit down to, even every morning is we have oatmeal with the cinnamon. Right after the oatmeal, there's usually the cinnamon. And then we have lots of boxes of American cereals, which I usually don't touch. I did a little bit because when I came back from France, I was like, wow, I'm back in America. We have box cereal. I mean, they have that in France, but it's not such a big deal like in America. And so I started having it, but now I stopped. I think I gained a little bit of weight, but now I stopped doing that. And then we have some nuts and raisins, and then we have a choice of oat milk or soy milk or almond milk. And then maybe peanut butter or almond butter. And of course there's bread, and you can go toast the bread. And yeah, you can try different things on your bread to change it every single day. Anyway, you get the point. So maybe every day we have the same breakfast, but if you really eat it in mindfulness, you see that the flavors that you're experiencing are different with every meal. There's something new you can learn from this meal with every bite. You chew it in new ways. You say, I'm chewing it on this side of my mouth, and I move it to this side of my mouth. Yeah. It will learn. So that's a training for our freedom. Tai talked about establishing sovereignty in ourselves. We need to learn to establish sovereignty. It's not automatic that we become free. Most people, they're just caught in as an automaton because of fear, trauma. Yeah, they live their lives and they don't want anything new. They don't want to experience something different. Just creating the same thing. There's a place to feel safe, but someday it breaks open, right? Because there are all these parts of our mind that we cannot see.
They're obscured by our afflictions of fear, filled up with. But when our mind then, which has been we try to reduce our mind to an automata, it doesn't like that. Because our mind is a living organism, our mind and body is alive, and we want to be free. It wants to be free, but because when we stepped outside of that boundary in the past, we had some kind of painful feeling, painful emotion, some kind of trauma. We don't want to go there anymore. We fear that space. And so meditation is opening up that space again, allowing us to create within ourselves a space of non-fear, so that the true freedom can grow and we learn. Recently, I wrote beginning a new letter to one of my sisters because some misunderstanding and wrong perception, and after I wrote that letter, I felt so free, because I saw that my mind was just going around in samsara, trying to say, no, but I meant this, and I didn't mean that, and why do I understand it like that, and this, and it's like arguing in my mind. So I said, okay. So during my writing retreat, I took one of my writing sessions to write a letter of beginning anew, to water the flowers and all the good things in that sister, and then also to share regrets, my own conduct, which I know had many shortcomings. And that's it. I didn't make any excuse. I just explained my admiration for many of the good qualities, and then a regret for my own. And even I didn't give that letter in yet to that sister, but I felt free right away. I felt so much happier because I had brought mindfulness to the situation. I didn't just like an automata to end up in a cycle of anger, of reaction, of judgment, and just because I know that there's no way out of that. I feel like I'm in a prison. When we feel like we're imprisoned by our relationship with someone, then we suffer so much. We don't feel freedom. So by sitting that down, that is a practice for myself. Of course, I give the letter to the sister, but it is primarily for myself to be able to do that. And I practice that many times with my brothers and my sisters, because I want to live in harmony. I don't want to live like an automaton in my daily life as a monk. I want to be free. And so I need to look and see, is there pride there that is blocking me? Pride is an affliction. What kind of things are blocking me from really truly communicating with myself? Well, with my brothers and sisters, and then also with myself. And so writing a letter of beginning anew, when we practice beginning anew, we the flowers of the other person, and then we express a regret, and then optionally we can express a hurt. But usually my practice is not to express a hurt in a letter. If we need to express a hurt, then we do that in person, so that we really have watered the person flowers and expressed the regret, so we create an environment for us to share our hurt with that person. And we always share our hurt from our own perception. We don't try to make a claim to know absolute reality. But we say, I had this perception, and this is why I was hurt. And when we do it like that, then the other person has the space to be able to share their own perception. Yeah. But my own practice, I don't do that in a letter, because usually I think if you do it like that, then they forget everything about the flower watering and the expression, and they only remember that you shared about your hurt, and they have a kind of bitter aftertaste. So my practice is just and that's good enough, usually, because there's so many things happening in the world that we have to deal with, go and revisit every single conflict down to every little detail, right? Of things that happened in the past. We recognize that we are practitioners and we're all doing this to try to practice. So can we let go of what happened, and then if someone sincerely shows that they want to begin anew and they want to change their behavior. They might not want to change their behavior in the way that you want them to, but at least they will try to do less harm in their way of acting. So that is my approach, very pragmatic to beginning anew. I don't, because I had that tendency when I was a young person in my family and so forth. We had to explain in every detail. And because in my family, we all have very good memory. My mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, and me, we all. So we remember in exquisite detail everything that happened. Some things, we just have to let it go, because yeah, they're unskillful things, but we have to give, we allow the obstacle, the compassion can arise. And even we feel the other person is behaving like an automaton, continuing to be in a cycle of reacting, arguing, saying the same things, but we are practitioners. We want to be free. We want to practice mindfulness. And so that is my personal approach, is like suffering in the world. We don't need to create more suffering in our way of being with each other. So let us look for ways to let go of what has happened in the past. Yeah, what has happened in the past still is having results in the future. We're in a climate crisis. We don't know if future generations will be able to live on the planet anyway like we are living today. That is the sum. We should not think it is only because we are living selfishly today. That is the actions of many generations of our ancestors. Many ancestors, thankfully, have learned the Dharma and have lived simply on the planet. Thank goodness the Dharma for what peace and happiness there is in the world. I think a lot of it is somehow touched because our ancestors got in touch with the Dharma, or whatever we call it. It doesn't have to be the word the Dharma, but the Dharma, real living Dharma. Thanks to those ancestors, we have the happiness that we can touch today. Thanks to those, we have some peace on this planet, some meaningful relationship to Mother Earth. But not all of our ancestors got in touch with the Dharma. And they continued to extract resources from the earth, violence towards the earth, towards people, using power, systems of power, racism as violence to extract more wealth and fame and power. And because of that, we have a crisis. We have become addicted to ancient. We are addicted to the ancient sunlight that is buried under the surface of the earth. And now we need to learn to come back to the present moment and enjoy the present moment sunlight, like solar panels or the wind. Yeah. That is the wisdom of the Dharma, that we can already find enough conditions for happiness in the present moment. But not all of our ancestors had that insight, and so we are faced with this situation today of the climate crisis. That is of past actions. But we need to learn to let go and not dwell too much on that. We need to be a shining light, an example for the world to go forward of how to live our lives simply in community. Here at Deer Park we have solar panels. We can find maybe something better than solar panels. We can learn to reduce electricity consumption. Do we really need it? Or can I just put my hammock up on a tree and be happy? Maybe with some water. Water is difficult in Southern California. But luckily here in Deer Park we have a well, and we have, if need, we have water we can use for the community. So we try to learn how to live simply. Yeah, so that we can see that happiness is possible with this kind of living. That is the wisdom of the Dhamma. So, and we do that because we want to be free. So with mindfulness, everything becomes a miracle. Every moment, just being aware of the wonders of our body, right here and right now, coming back to our breathing, is a wonder. I really love the practice of mindfulness. Concentration. So with mindfulness, we want to have more mindfulness. Luckily, I don't know anyone who became addicted to mindfulness. Mindfulness is so wonderful. Maybe you think, well, somebody gets addicted to mindfulness. But I didn't see that ever happen. You can never have enough awareness, enough mindfulness, I used to say. So we can always increase our mindfulness, and our relationships become more harmonious, our capacity to see what is happening in the present moment grows greater, so that our suffering becomes less. Because when we know what's happening in the present moment, then we don't do or say things that cause harm or suffering. That is our native nature. It's only because we don't see what is going on that we cause to ourselves and to others. So the more we want mindfulness, the more we want it to be there in every moment. So that is concentration. So learning to keep our mindfulness throughout the day, throughout 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds. So Tai used to use the marker and say, oh. So when we are aware of our breathing, we keep our mind on our breath, the whole length of the in-breath, and then the whole length of the out-breath. That is concentration. So keeping our attention completely on the object. So subject and object become one. The unification of body and mind. Yeah. So our body might be our object of our mindfulness, and our mind stays with the body. So in relaxation, we do a body scan. So we stay with the body for half an hour or 40 minutes. And this brother or sister guiding us in the meditation voice is helping us to maintain our concentration. There are many things that want to pull our attention away. When we learn that our attention is one of our most valuable resources, then we learn not to give our attention to that advertisement or even to read the news. The newspapers are vying for your attention, and there are some things we need to know, but I always remember, they asked Tai, do you watch the news? And Tai said, Tai doesn't need to. If something important happens, one of Tai's students will let him know. So I always remember that when I get too much in, like these 2 weeks, I reduced to a minimum, like checking email. I only came to the monastery a few days to check email. And I think I looked at the news maybe once or twice, very briefly. And I actually didn't miss very much. And sometimes I can very easily get into just checking the headlines every single day. But what am I learning that is new? Am I checking in with my body? That is much more important to my happiness than reading the news every day. So learning how to let go of those afflictions and bring our attention to the present moment. So in order to understand free will, we need to understand the nature of our volition. And when we look with precision into every instant, we see that there are certain factors that are always there in a moment of consciousness. contact. So when our attention comes in contact with our breathing, that is awareness of breathing. So that gives rise to a perception of the breath. Yeah. So we have contact, attention, if we attend to our thinking, then we are not attending to our breathing. So by bringing our attention back to the breath, that is concentration. Our attention stays on the object of our meditation for a long time, yeah, for even just a few seconds. That is concentration. And the object of our attention can be anything. It can be our body, it can be our thinking, it can be the bug flying around my face. Yeah, these are so. And when we get down into the neuroscience of attention, we see that actually our attention is just clusters, patterns of firing simultaneously. And at any given moment, our brain, through the sense inputs, is modeling the world outside through patterns of neurons firing. And so our attention, all these patterns of neurons, sometimes hundreds of neurons firing at the same time, they're all vying for. And so when the bug comes and almost gets in my eye, then suddenly my attention shifts very quickly there, because this might become dangerous. The bug is just flying around, it's okay. I don't pay much attention. It's not become alert. But when it comes so close to my eye and I feel it, then suddenly my attention quickly shifts there, because I know that it's very painful to get something in my eye. And so my body knows that. And so suddenly that becomes the primary object of my attention. But when the bug goes away, then I bring my attention back to my words, what I'm saying. So giving is just concentration on our speech. So that's why I always say Dhamma sharing is just like any other practice. Mindful breathing, mindful walking, mindful eating. In Dhamma sharing, we become aware of the words that we're saying and the words in what we're hearing, and also what we are seeing in the person. But that becomes the object of our attention. So we just bring that same mindfulness that we brought to our step or to the speaking or the listening, if we're just listening. It's not that complicated. Everything we've been doing in the rest of the retreat, we just bring it to our speech and our actions. And people learn, and they say things they never imagined they would say in Dhamma sharing, just by bringing mindfulness to their speaking. An automata. Right? I keep coming back to the automaton. Not there anymore. See, that's an automata. I conditioned myself to see the word automata written here on the board, and now I was not mindful that it's not. When I took, it's not there anymore. It's a different word. It's attention. So I have to change. So this is. So our speaking can be automatic, but with mindfulness, it becomes free, and concentration is insight of the training. So insight is like, with attention, seeing that certain factors are always there in a moment of consciousness. There's the contact. Like our attention is directing what we are looking at, to use the term look. But it's not eyes, right? It's actually our mind is attending to something, and then it comes in contact with the object. And that gives rise to a feeling. It can be a pleasant feeling, painful feeling, mixed feeling, neutral feeling. But with every moment of attention, there's feeling that arises of some sort. And so we learn to recognize that, because actually we live our lives according to our feeling. So, and usually we're trying to go in the direction of pleasant feelings and try to avoid painful feelings. But as meditation practitioners, we learn to to also allow painful feelings to happen. We want to be free. We don't want to be an automaton who's just, like everyone, just trying to get away from painful feelings and get closer to the pleasant feelings. We want to understand our mind, and we want our mind to become imperturbable. So we no longer run away from painful feelings. We allow them to come up. Of course, we don't create painful feelings unnecessarily, but when painful feelings arise, we practice to look at them with mindfulness and concentration. Then we get an insight into the nature of that painful feeling. And as we've already been learning, we know that suffering and happiness are of the same nature. By understanding our suffering, we also create the possibility for happiness to happen. So understanding this happening very quickly in our mind is so important. We attend to something, we come in contact with it, a feeling arises, as well as perception. So we might have the perception, that's pleasant. Oh, that's painful. Just very minimally, but we also might note the color if we're looking at something, like I have a pleasant feeling when I look at the orchid, and so I want to, not only because it's an orchid, but because I think like Brother Min An or somebody else has prepared the space, so they care, so that caring gives me happiness. So it's not just the beautiful form of the orchid, but it's also the care. These things are all happening very, very quickly. And so in the future, when I see an orchid, I think of Thai, usually, because Thai always, brothers and sisters love to put orchids on, for Thai's Dhamma. Not always orchids, but very often orchids for Thai's Dhamma talk. And so I think of Thai, so it's a very pleasant feeling. But I can get caught in that and think Thai is, for Thai it has to be an orchid. And then I get caught in Shneya Varana, the obstacle of knowledge. So we start to think, for Thai we always have to have an orchid. Or for Thai we always have to do it like this or like that. And we are caught. We don't see Thai's freedom. Because Thai also sometimes had to give Dhamma talks in very difficult situations. I saw it in Vietnam. Sometimes the sound system was a mess. And people could not hear Thai. And in 2005, when we went back to Vietnam with Thai, sometimes Thai had to give Dhamma talks in the most difficult situation. And so we know that Thai also is embracing those difficult, painful feelings of having to give a Dhamma talk when people cannot hear you. And Thai embracing, not getting caught in obstacle of knowledge. Things have to be always like that. And then volition, the fifth of the universal mental factors. And this is related here with the topic of today, free will. So we need to understand our volition, because that is what is causing us to behave like an automaton in our daily life. Our reacting. So Thai shared the story, and in one of his books, of a young man who, every time he went to meetings, he would react and get angry at what happened in the meeting. And so one of his friends came along and said, "Dear brother, I see that you get very angry when you come to the meetings." So I see Sister Daknim smiling, because sometimes our monastic meetings are like that. And we know someone who always reacts. Maybe, sometimes we are that person. We always, react in the same way in a talk or in a meeting. So that friend wanted to help. He had compassion for this friend. It's always reacting, because the attention, the contact is coming in contact with the object, but it's It's stuck. We have an attachment in our mind. Already when we came to the meeting, we already knew we were going to get angry. Sometimes it's like that. We know we're going to get angry. And so maybe it's better we stay home. Right? So, because actually we're not mindful of what's happening in the meeting. We already have an idea. And we are creating the conditions in our mind for our suffering to happen. Because we think, that sister's going to say that, that brother's going to say that, and I don't agree with that. And so that friend, he came to his friend, he said, dear friend, I see that you get angry often in meetings. What if I held your hand and I squeezed your hand when I notice you reacting, and you just take a breath, a few breaths, before you say or do anything. And so he did that for that friend, and he squeezed his hand. And so instead of reacting in the habitual way, like an automaton, he actually was able to breathe and recognize what was going on, that he was very quickly, these universal factors were operating. His attention was going to that same part of his mind, the same perception, same reaction. Become anger. Yeah, that's a volition to release those hormones in our body which give rise to anger. And I didn't give that teaching in a book, but in 2013, when I had written to the president of the World Bank, and I asked him if Thai could come and speak to the staff of the World Bank. At that time, I had known him before. He became the president of the World Bank, and Jim Kim, Dr. Jim Kim, and so I knew that he practiced mindfulness and meditation. And I knew that he loved a teacher's book, The Miracle of Mindfulness. Anyway, we were invited to go, the whole Sangha with Thai, to the World Bank, and Thai gave to the World Bank behind the door. And anyway, when we were preparing for that, and Thai also taught the World Bank staff. He did a day of mindfulness and also did a panel presentation in September 2013. And we went a few weeks before to prepare, because this was, I felt, very important, and I was the main organizer. I wanted everything to go a certain way. And when we came to the place that was being set up for the day of mindfulness, actually, it was not this, a few weeks before we went, and this was actually the day before the day of mindfulness. And I saw that they had Thai on the podium. They had a higher, and they had a screen on the side, and all these people would be sitting in chairs behind Thai, looking at the screen of Thai teaching. And when I saw that, I thought, oh my gosh, we cannot do that. People cannot Thai like that, and they're not even looking at Thai. They have their shoulder to Thai. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is so disrespectful. We cannot do the day of mindfulness like that. And Phap Luu was there with me, thankfully. And he had told me a couple of days before, but I didn't know that it came from a story from Thai. He said, Brother Phap, I know this is a very stressful situation. You are the main organizer of this. And sometimes you have a tendency to react. And so you know that if I see that happening, I'm going to squeeze your hand. And so I remember we were walking into the place where the atrium of the World Bank, where the day of mindfulness would happen, and I saw the chairs like that, and right away I started to breathe in deeply, and I thought, I was going to, the organizer of the World Bank, a piece of my mind about this setup. And Phap Luu took my hand and squeezed my hand, and I stopped, and it really worked. Breathe, because squeezing my hand, it overrode, just like the moth, my eye, right? That closeness, and then the that I felt. You know, to have a second body like that, and an older brother who can take my hand and squeeze my hand, and I was able to stop and breathe and give space to the moment and not react in the same way. That is freedom. That is free will. That is mindfulness, concentration, and insight. And it is, we can do it with a good spiritual friend helping us. That is also possible. We don't have to pretend we have to save the world by ourselves. But we can reach for our brother or sister's hand, maybe squeeze it, just to help them to come back to their body, back to their breathing, and then we were able to work it out very harmoniously. No, it was not a problem at all to have the people like that. But what would have been a problem was my reaction. But because, thanks to having a good spiritual friend, I came back to the 3 trainings of mindfulness, concentration, and insight, and didn't react and didn't get angry. And so, isn't it? Don't we all wish we had a friend like that in certain moments of our life when we didn't have anyone there to remind us not to get caught and be an automaton, just reacting to in the same way. So we need to look deeply into our volition. It is behind our volition, all of these firing happening very quickly, our contact, attention, feeling, which is firing. Are we going to get angry? Or are we going to put our volition in mindful breathing, stopping, coming back to our body, and the possibility of freedom? Thank you. Thank you all. It's a very free will. And I think that Tai shared many more things about this, and I'll try to put it into the future talks. So we'll have I think this is the 18th, and we'll have another class next week, the 19th.